And now it's time for your daily reminder on the impending apocalypse. I'm sorry if it sounds scary, but that's the intention. The gentle reminders have not worked, you see. Half-hearted summits have not worked. Maybe scary warnings will. And this one is pretty straightforward. Our seas are rising, our islands are sinking, and pretty soon entire countries will be extinct. It does not get scarier than this. For most of the world, yesterday's climate report was a warning. Act now or prepare for the worst. But for small island nations, it was a death knell. It may already be too late to help them. The climate report said we can stop global warming by halting emissions, but experts say sea levels would still rise because climate change is not a switch. Results will take years, if not decades. So island nations across the world are clubbing together and appealing for urgent action. They're represented by the Alliance of Small Island States. There are 39 members, including Singapore, Seychelles, Fiji, Papua New Guinea, Cuba, the Bahamas. These nations are spread all over the planet, and they're on the front lines of climate change. I'll give you the example of Kiribati, a tiny nation in the Pacific. It is made up of 3 archipelagos. The tallest one is just 6 feet over sea level. If the water rises by 3 feet, 2/3 of Kiribati could be submerged. For these people, climate change is not a conspiracy theory. They see it every day in supercharged floods and hybrid cyclones. So it's time to stop putting a to-do stamp on climate change because the dangers are imminent. Not in some distant future. The United Nations estimates that temperatures will rise 1.5 degrees Celsius in the next 2 decades. At this rate, seas will rise by 0.5 meter in this century. I'm talking about a modest scenario. What if things get worse? Then sea levels could rise by up to 2 meters at the end of this century. That's more than 6 feet. Do you know what that means? The whole of Kiribati could disappear in this century. Same for the Maldives. All of its coral islands are below 6 feet elevation. They could all disappear in this century. We're talking about millions of people displaced. A new generation of climate refugees. Who will take them in? Who will give them jobs and feed them? The fact is, climate change is more expensive than climate action. And to prove this, let's shift from the creeping seas to the raging inferno, the wildfires in Europe. They've charred the earth, uprooted thousands of residents, laid waste to settlements. Look at some of these pictures. If they don't scream apocalypse, nothing will. What about the receipt for this disaster? We don't have the full picture yet, but the Greek Prime Minister has announced a compensation package, 500 million euros, $587 million. That's the bill of climate change. We, the people, are paying this bill. But what about the politicians who ignored the threat, the leaders who denied climate change and patronized factories? Well, some of them are apologizing, like the Prime Minister of Greece. He says climate change is a reason, but not an excuse.
The extent of the destruction, especially in Evia and in Attica, blackens all of our hearts, and I'm the first to apologize for whatever weaknesses existed. I completely understand the pain of our citizens who saw their houses and property burning, the upheaval of having to abruptly leave their homes.
A sorry means little when a country is burning. Nonetheless, it's a start. If politicians are responsible for crime, for national security, for economic growth, then why not climate change? Give it some thought the next time you vote. And also remember these pictures the next time you vote. The pictures on your screen. This is smoke rising from the fires in Siberia. Do you know where this picture was clicked? The North Pole. For the first time ever, there is smoke engulfing the North Pole, a true hallmark of human progress. Siberia is supposed to be one of the coldest places on Earth. This is what it looks like now. 3.4 million hectares are still burning. Most of it is too remote for firefighters to access. For once, it makes sense to play the blame game. Take the Pacific Islands, for instance. They're not carbon monsters. They don't have factory chains and coal plants. But guess who does? Australia. Rich, powerful countries burn coal. Poor coastal nations bear the brunt. Last week, Prime Minister Scott Morrison met with the Pacific nations. He promised to support these small countries, but that doesn't change the past. For years, Prime Minister Morrison denied climate change. His appetite for coal sunk the Pacific Islands, and even now he's refusing to budge. The Australian PM says he will not sign a blank check to control climate change. He has rejected the target of net zero emissions. And we wonder why climate change is uncontrollable. The politics has made matters worse. We spent time debating when we should have been acting. We spent time spinning conspiracies when we should have been setting targets. These wildfires are a testimony to that negligence. In this case, Nero was indeed fiddling when Rome burned. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.